So there I was, halfway through my first swim at the public pool since forever, when I suddenly realized I was definitely not going to make it across without totally drowning. I mean, I'm not exactly Michael Phelps, but this was worse than I expected. I was running out of breath, my limbs felt like jelly, and just as I started flailing a little, I caught sight of him, the lifeguard. He was perched on that high chair, like some kind of guardian angel in red shorts and a whistle around his neck, scanning the pool with those sharp brown eyes. And then, instead of just blowing his whistle and pointing at me like some annoying drill sergeant, he jumped down and swam over like he actually cared. Not in a bossy way, but with this calm confidence that made me feel, well, less like a total idiot who couldn't swim 10 meters without nearly dying. I'm not even embarrassed to admit I was gasping for air when he got to me. And then, he did something that, no joke, made me laugh in the middle of my panic. He looked at me, all serious but with this weird little smile, and asked, "Do you need mouth-to-mouth?" At that moment, all I could think was, okay, this guy is either hilarious or completely serious, and honestly, I was too out of breath to really care which. But something about the way he said it wasn't just a lifeguard routine line. It felt like a genuine offer to actually help, and maybe even a little joke to break the tension. Before I knew it, I was sitting on the pool's edge, wrapped in one of those scratchy towels they give out, trying to catch my breath, and he was there, sitting beside me, still in his red shorts, with that easy smile that made my heart do this stupid little flip I wasn't ready to explain. I don't even know his name yet, but I couldn't stop thinking about how something as simple as a lifeguard asking if I needed mouth-to-mouth was probably the most memorable moment of my entire summer. And honestly, I was pretty sure this was just the beginning of a very weird, very unexpected story. So there I was, sitting on the edge of the pool, wrapped in that scratchy towel, trying to pretend I wasn't totally mortified about needing a lifeguard rescue. The thing was, I was already a little self-conscious about swimming in front of strangers. Not exactly the most coordinated guy, and definitely not the most athletic. But now, with him sitting right there beside me, it felt like my embarrassment was dialed up to 11. He glanced over, eyebrows raised in that, "You okay way? You caught your breath, yeah?" I nodded, trying not to sound like a wheezing mess. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just underestimated the distance, I guess." He smirked, running a hand through his damp hair. You'd think a pool would be safer than, say, the ocean. But nope, pool's a sneaky beast. I laughed, and suddenly the tension shifted. It was like the panic from a minute ago just evaporated. "So what's your name, Mr. Lifeguard?" He hesitated for a moment, like he wasn't sure if he should tell me. "It's Ethan." Then he offered his hand. "You're?" I shook it, still trying to look like I wasn't a total wreck. "Mark." Ethan gave me this quick once-over, like he was trying to figure out if I was going to be a regular pool visitor or just some hapless guy who almost drowned once and never showed up again. "You coming back tomorrow, Mark?" I shrugged, feeling a little bolder now. "I might. Depends if I survive your mouth-to-mouth training." He laughed. "Fair enough." We sat there for a bit, the sun beating down on us, the usual sounds of kids splashing and parents chatting around the pool. But somehow, it felt like the noise faded out, and it was just us. It was weird how a guy I'd just met 15 minutes ago could already feel familiar. "So," I said, trying to break the silence, "how long have you been a lifeguard?" "Since college," Ethan replied. "It's a decent gig. Keeps me outside, pays the bills, and I get to meet all kinds of people. Like you." His smile grew a bit, like he knew something I didn't. I cleared my throat, suddenly feeling awkward again. "Yeah, well, I'm probably your worst customer," he shrugged. "Everyone's got their thing." I glanced back at the pool, watching a kid splash his mom, then back at Ethan. "You ever have to actually rescue someone before?" "More times than I'd like." His voice got serious for a second. "But it's part of the job. You learn to keep calm, even when everything's going sideways." I nodded, thinking about how calm he had been just now when I was freaking out. It was impressive. And honestly, kind of attractive. Out of nowhere, a whistle blew nearby, and Ethan stood up. "Duty calls." He looked down at me with that same easy smile. "Feel better." "Much better," I said, grateful I could finally breathe normally again. He gave me one last nod before climbing back into his chair. "If you survive today, maybe I'll see you around." I laughed. Survival's the goal. And just like that, he was back in lifeguard mode, watchful, focused, commanding attention without even trying. But for some reason, I kept looking back at him, hoping he'd glance my way again. The next day, I found myself back at the pool, like I'd somehow been hypnotized. Ethan was already there, scanning the swimmers with that same intensity. When he spotted me, he raised an eyebrow and gave a little nod. I waved awkwardly. "Hey, Mark," he called during a lull in his watch. "Ready for round 2? I grinned, feeling a spark of something I couldn't quite put into words. Definitely. Over the next few weeks, showing up at the pool became more than just about swimming. It was about seeing Ethan, talking to him during breaks, and trying not to trip over my words when he smiled my way. He was easy to talk to, but also had this quiet confidence that made me feel like maybe I wasn't such a disaster after all. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the grass near the pool, towel off, sun warming my skin. Ethan was off duty, sitting beside me, and for the first time, we were just two guys hanging out, not lifeguard and near drowning victim. "So," he said, tossing a pebble into the grass, "what got you into swimming anyway?" I shrugged. I guess I never really did. Not seriously. Always thought it was something I should do, but never felt confident. You? "I grew up near the ocean," he said, eyes distant for a second. "Swimming was survival. Lifeguarding was just a natural step." There was a pause, and I realized he was looking at me a little differently, like he was trying to figure me out, or maybe deciding if he wanted to know me better. I took a breath and said, "I'm really glad you asked if I needed mouth-to-mouth that day," he chuckled. "Only because you look like you needed it. Plus, it's a good icebreaker, don't you think?" I laughed, feeling my stomach flutter in a way that definitely wasn't from the sun. Yeah, the best icebreaker. We sat there for a while, just talking and watching the pool go about its usual chaos. And as the afternoon stretched into evening, I realized something. What started as a near drowning was turning into something unexpected, something I wasn't quite ready to name yet. But I knew I wanted to find out. After that afternoon, things started to settle into a routine that I never expected. Every time I showed up at the pool, Ethan was there, either on duty or just hanging out nearby, and I found myself looking forward to those moments more than I probably should have. I'd tell myself it was just about swimming practice, but deep down, I knew it was about him. About seeing his smile, the way he'd toss a quick joke my way, or just the casual way he leaned against the fence, watching the water. One day, a few weeks after my near-drowning episode, I found myself sitting on one of those plastic lawn chairs by the pool steps, drying off after what was, honestly, a pretty solid swim. Ethan was on break, sitting across from me with his legs stretched out, sunglasses on, chilling like he owned the place. I decided to take a shot. So, I said, trying to sound nonchalant but probably failing miserably, "What do you do when you're not saving lives or making sarcastic mouth-to-mouth jokes?" He laughed without missing a beat. "Not much, really. Work, gym, Netflix marathons. Nothing too exciting." "Sounds like my life," I said with a smirk. "Maybe that's why we get along," he said, smiling in a way that made me feel like he knew exactly what I was thinking. We fell into an easy conversation, small talk about favorite shows, music, and the usual pool gossip. It was comfortable, the kind of easy back and forth that happens when two people are slowly figuring each other out. But amid the comfort, I couldn't shake this buzz of anticipation, like something was about to shift between us. A couple of days later, the pool was quieter than usual. The summer was starting to wind down, and the crowd had thinned out. I was swimming laps when I noticed Ethan down by the locker rooms, putting his whistle away and gathering his stuff. I stopped in the water, catching his eye. "Heading out early?" I called. "Yeah," he said with a shrug. "Got some things to take care of. You?" "Just finished my swim for the day." I climbed out, wrapping myself in my towel. We ended up walking toward the parking lot together, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows around us. Neither of us said much at first, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was like the space between us was filling with something unspoken. So, Ethan finally said, glancing sideways at me, "You ever been to that coffee shop on Main? The one with the terrible pastries but amazing lattes?" I raised an eyebrow. "Terrible pastries? Sounds like a deal breaker." He grinned. "You'd be surprised. The place is a bit of a dump, but the coffee's worth it." I laughed. "I guess I'll have to check it out then. Maybe I could show you sometime," he said, and the way his voice softened made me catch my breath a little. My heart was doing that annoying flutter again, but I played it cool. "Sounds like a plan." We reached the parking lot, standing there awkwardly for a moment, like neither of us wanted to be the first to say goodbye. Then he surprised me. "Hey, Mark," he said, hesitating just a bit. "Do you want to grab that coffee now? I'm free for a bit." I blinked, caught off guard in the best way possible. "Yeah, I'd like that." We hopped in his car and drove off to the coffee shop, the windows down, the smell of the late summer air filling the car. I realized then that something about sitting beside him like this, no lifeguard chair, no pool between us, felt different. More real. More possible. At the coffee shop, the place was exactly what Ethan said. A little dingy, with faded wallpaper and a counter that looked like it had seen better decades. But the smell of fresh coffee was real, and the barista greeted us with a friendly smile. We took a small table by the window, and as we waited for our drinks, I caught Ethan watching me with this quiet intensity that made me suddenly nervous. I wanted to say something clever, but my brain went blank. "So, Mark," he said, breaking the silence, "what's the story here? I mean, besides nearly drowning and needing mouth-to-mouth from your friendly neighborhood lifeguard." I laughed. "You're not exactly subtle, you know that?" He shrugged, eyes twinkling. "I'm straightforward. That's how I know you're not just here for free swimming lessons." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through me for reasons that had nothing to do with the coffee. "I guess I'm here because I don't want this to be the last time I see you." Ethan's expression softened, and the way the light caught his eyes made my heart skip. "Same here." For the first time since all this started, I felt like maybe I wasn't just a guy who nearly drowned and got saved. Maybe I was someone who could actually matter to someone like Ethan. Our conversation stretched on, moving from funny anecdotes to deeper talks about life, dreams, and the kind of loneliness that sometimes sneaks up no matter how many people are around. It was real, honest, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. When we finally stepped back outside, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Ethan looked at me and said, I think this might be the start of something good." I grinned, feeling that flutter again, but this time with hope instead of panic. "I think so too." We walked back to the car side by side, and in that quiet moment, I realized that being rescued from the pool was just the beginning. What came after, what was happening right now, was the part one really wanted to hold on to. The days that followed felt like I was living in some kind of slow-motion dream. I kept replaying that evening with Ethan at the coffee shop, the way the light caught his eyes, the way our conversation had flowed so naturally that I almost forgot how awkward I usually was around new people. After that night, we started hanging out more outside the pool. Sometimes it was grabbing coffee, like our impromptu date, other times just casual walks or catching a movie. It was a kind of easy companionship I hadn't realized I was missing. Someone who could make me laugh without trying too hard, who listened without judgment, and who never made me feel like I had to pretend to be anything else. Still, there was this quiet tension between us that neither of us really addressed. I think part of me was scared of ruining whatever thing we had, and maybe Ethan was too. We'd share glances that lingered a second too long, or brush shoulders in a way that sent a jolt through me, but then we'd both look away and act like nothing happened. It was like we were both waiting for the other to make the first move. One Saturday afternoon, we found ourselves back at the pool, me swimming laps, pretending to be a little more confident, and Ethan on lifeguard duty, scanning the water with his usual focus. The sun was blazing, and the place was bustling with families and kids splashing everywhere. After my swim, I sat on the grass near the pool, towel over my legs, catching my breath. Ethan strolled over during his break, a water bottle in one hand and that familiar half smile on his face. "Hey," he said, dropping down beside me. I was thinking maybe we should do something different this weekend. No pools, no swimsuits? I raised an eyebrow. Like what? He shrugged. I don't know. Maybe a hike? Or checking out that new art exhibit downtown? Something that doesn't involve me watching you almost drown. I laughed, feeling my cheeks warm. Sounds good. I'm down. We traded numbers that day, officially making plans for the weekend, which somehow felt more nerve-wracking than it should have. Because it wasn't just about hanging out, it was about something more. At least for me. The weekend came fast. On Saturday morning, I showed up at his place, a little nervous, wondering what the hell I was supposed to wear for a hike. Ethan greeted me at the door, casual in a t-shirt and jeans, his hair still a bit messy from sleep. Ready? He asked, grinning. Yeah, I said, trying to sound casual but feeling my heart race. We drove out to this trail just a half hour outside town, the kind of place where the air smelled like pine and the only sounds were birds and the crunch of our footsteps on leaves. The hike wasn't too hard, but enough to make me sweat, and I was glad. It gave me something to focus on besides the way Ethan kept stealing glances at me. At one point, we stopped on a rock overlooking a small valley, the sun filtering through the trees. Ethan sat down beside me, and for a moment, we just looked out at the view. Then he turned to me, face serious for the first time in a while. Mark, can I ask you something? Sure, I said, my throat suddenly dry. He hesitated, then said, Are you interested in me? Like, more than just friends? I felt my heart pound in my chest, and I struggled to find the words that wouldn't make me sound like some awkward teenager confessing a crush. I am, I said finally. I've been scared to say it because I didn't want to mess things up. But yeah, I am. Ethan's face softened, relief and something like hope in his eyes. Good, he said quietly. Because I've been thinking the same thing. We sat there for a moment, the world around us quiet and still, and then he reached out, taking my hand gently in his. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. The rest of the hike was a blur of laughter and shy smiles, and when we got back to the car, I caught myself grinning like an idiot. Ethan bumped his shoulder against mine playfully, so, he said, now that we've cleared that up, what's next? I shrugged, feeling more confident than I had in a long time. How about we take it one step at a time, starting with dinner? He nodded. Dinner sounds perfect. That night, over some greasy pizza and bad wine at a tiny hole-in-the-wall place, we talked about everything, our pasts, our hopes, the things that made us who we were. It wasn't perfect, and there were moments where I stumbled over my words, or got a bit too honest, but Ethan just listened. And when I looked across the table, watching his smile light up the dim room, I realized something. This wasn't just some summer fling born out of a near-drowning incident. This was something real, something I wanted to hold on to, no matter how scared I was. As we walked back to his car under the stars, he took my hand again, squeezing it gently. Thanks for taking a chance on me, he said. I smiled, feeling like the luckiest guy in the world. Right back at you, Ethan. Right back at you. That night, after I got home, I lay in bed replaying every moment with Ethan, the way his hand felt in mine, the easy smile that made the world seem a little less daunting. I wasn't the kind of guy who usually believed in the one or meant to be, but with him, it felt different. Like, maybe this was worth holding on to, even if I was terrified of messing it up. The next week, things started to shift. We were no longer just two guys who happened to hang out by a pool or grab coffee occasionally. We were a we, even if neither of us said it out loud yet. There was a new kind of closeness, the kind that sneaks up on you through shared jokes, lingering glances, and the quiet moments when you just sit together in comfortable silence, no need to fill the space with words. One evening, Ethan invited me over after his shift. His apartment was small but cozy, filled with books and some framed photos of the ocean and surfing spots I assumed he'd been to. He showed me around like he was proud of the space, and I couldn't help but smile at how genuine he seemed. We ended up in the living room, sitting on opposite ends of his couch, sipping cheap beer and watching a documentary about wildlife. At some point, Ethan reached over, his hand brushing mine. I didn't pull away. Instead, I turned toward him, and he met my gaze with that quiet intensity I'd come to crave. "Mark," he said softly, "I'm glad you're here." "Me too," I replied, feeling my heart speed up. There was a pause, electric and full of all the things we hadn't said yet. Then, slowly, Ethan closed the distance between us, his hand cupping my cheek. The touch was gentle, tentative, like we were both testing the waters of something new and fragile. I leaned into him, letting the warmth of his hand melt away the last of my doubts. When our lips met, it was soft and slow, a promise rather than a rush. I felt like I was finally breathing again, like I'd been holding my breath for so long and could finally exhale. After that night, everything felt more real. We started spending more time together, not just at the pool or for coffee, but in the quiet, everyday moments, cooking dinner, sharing playlists, walking through the neighborhood with no destination in mind. But of course, it wasn't always perfect. There were moments when I caught myself second-guessing everything, wondering if I was moving too fast, or if Ethan felt the same way I did. Sometimes, the silence would stretch between us, heavy with unspoken fears. One afternoon, a few weeks later, we were sitting on the back porch of Ethan's place, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery colors. I turned to him, feeling a knot in my stomach. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything?" he said, reaching for my hand. "Are you scared?" "About us?" Ethan's thumb traced circles on my skin, and he sighed. "Yeah, I am. Because this," he gestured between us, "feels like the most real thing I've had in a long time. And I don't want to mess it up. But I'm also scared of not trying." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Same here, but I think that's normal." He nodded, eyes softening. "Normal sounds good." That night we fell asleep tangled together, the weight of our fears lightened by the comfort of knowing we were in it together. Life kept moving. The pool's summer crowd dwindled as fall crept in, cooler mornings replacing scorching afternoons. Ethan's lifeguard shifts became less frequent, and we started looking for other ways to spend our time. One chilly evening, we went to a small jazz club downtown. Ethan's idea. The music was smoky and slow, the kind that wraps around you like a warm blanket. We sat close, his arm around my shoulder, and I felt so lucky it almost hurt. During a slow song, Ethan leaned in and whispered, "You know, I almost didn't ask if you needed mouth-to-mouth that day." I laughed quietly. "Really? And why was that?" "Because I was hoping for a reason to talk to you." I looked up at him, heart pounding. "Well, you definitely got my attention." He kissed my temple, and I realized that moment was one I'd hold on to forever. The unexpected way life could throw you off balance, only to set you down somewhere better. In the weeks that followed, we navigated the ups and downs like any couple figuring things out. Work stress, family stuff, and even the occasional pool drama. But through it all, Ethan was there, steady, patient, and real. One evening, as we walked home beneath a sky full of stars, Ethan stopped and pulled me close. "Mark," he said, voice low, "I don't want this to be just a summer thing. I want more. If you're up for it." I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the autumn chill. "I'm more than up for it." He kissed me then, slow and sure, like a promise that whatever came next, we'd face it together. And honestly, after all the near drowning, the awkward moments, and the doubts, I'd never felt more alive. After that night under the stars, things between Ethan and me started to get real in ways I hadn't anticipated. Not just the usual dating stuff, but the kind of real-life stuff that makes you realize you're not just in a summer romance, you're building something. We began merging parts of our lives, little by little, introducing each other to friends, sharing our favorite spots around town, even talking about weekends that didn't involve the pool. One Sunday afternoon, Ethan invited me over for brunch. When I showed up, his kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and something sweet. He was wearing a worn-out band tee and those red shorts I'd come to associate with the lifeguard. Somehow, those shorts always looked better on him than anyone else. He grinned when he saw me at the door. "Thought I'd try my hand at pancakes," he said, flipping one expertly. "Don't get used to it," I laughed. "I'm already impressed." We ate on the small balcony, overlooking the city's quiet hum. The sunlight filtered through the leaves on the potted plants Ethan kept, casting dappled shadows on the table. It felt like we'd created this little world just for ourselves. After brunch, we decided to walk through the nearby park. Leaves were starting to turn golden, and the crisp air carried that unmistakable smell of fall. I was telling Ethan about a job interview I had coming up when I suddenly stopped mid-sentence. "Hey," I said, "how do you feel about moving in together?" He blinked, surprised, but not in a bad way. "That's fast." "Yeah," I admitted, "but it just feels right. I mean, we've been hanging out almost every day, and I don't really want to go back to separate apartments and miss texts when I could just see you whenever." Ethan smiled, reaching out to squeeze my hand. "I like the sound of that." We spent the rest of the afternoon apartment hunting online, laughing at some of the ridiculous listings and dreaming about a shared future that suddenly felt less like a fantasy and more like a plan. A couple weeks later, we found a small place with hardwood floors and a tiny balcony that reminded me of the one at Ethan's old apartment. Moving day was chaotic, boxes everywhere, misplaced keys, and way too much takeout, but it was ours. Our start. One evening, after unpacking half the kitchen, Ethan and I sat on the floor among the cardboard chaos, sharing a bottle of cheap wine. He looked over at me, eyes reflecting the warm glow of the lamp. "Mark," he said softly, "I'm glad you almost drowned that day." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a weird thing to say." He laughed, but there was something tender in his voice. "No, seriously. If you hadn't, I might never have met you. You gave me a reason to stop just watching from my lifeguard chair and actually dive in." I smiled, feeling that familiar flutter settle into something steadier. "Guess we both saved each other, huh?" Ethan nodded, leaning in to kiss me gently. Living together wasn't always sunshine and roses. There were nights when we argued over silly things. Whose turn it was to do the dishes, the thermostat setting wars, or what show to binge next. But those moments never lasted long, always dissipating into laughter or quiet apologies. One late October night, Ethan and I were curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching old movies. Suddenly, he turned to me with a serious look. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said, bracing myself. He swallowed, then said, "Have you told your family about us?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been avoiding it, honestly. My family was traditional, and I wasn't sure how they'd react. "Not yet," I admitted. "I'm still figuring out how." Ethan nodded, understanding more in that moment about the parts of me I kept guarded. "Whenever you're ready, I'll be there." That promise meant more than he probably realized. A few weeks later, I finally worked up the nerve to tell my sister. It was over dinner. Casual but nerve-wracking. To my relief, she was supportive, even excited to meet Ethan. When Ethan and I met up afterward, I was buzzing from the conversation. "She's cool," I said. "Really cool." Ethan smiled, taking my hand. "I told you, this is the start of something good." And it was. Through the everyday challenges, the little victories, the growing pains, Ethan was becoming more than just the lifeguard who asked if I needed mouth-to-mouth. He was my partner, my anchor, the person I wanted beside me no matter what. One chilly evening, as we stood on our tiny balcony watching the city lights flicker on, Ethan pulled me close. "Mark," he said, voice steady, "I want you to know, I'm not going anywhere." I smiled, heart full. "Neither am I." And just like that, the lifeguard who once saved me from drowning became the man I was ready to dive into life with. Head first, heart wide open. Months passed, and the rhythm Ethan and I had found together felt steady and true. We weren't perfect, and life threw in its share of curveballs, work stresses, family ups and downs, the usual stuff, but we faced it all as a team. Looking back, it's almost funny how a near drowning at the pool led me to this place, where I felt safe and seen in a way I hadn't known was possible. One afternoon, we decided to revisit the pool, the place where it all began. I was nervous at first, but Ethan just smiled that easy, reassuring smile, and said, "This time, no mouth-to-mouth needed." We sat on the edge, feet dangling in the water, watching kids splash and families laugh. The sun was warm, the air filled with that familiar mix of chlorine and summer. I looked over at Ethan, and in that moment, everything felt right. "Mark," he said quietly, I've been thinking maybe it's time we make this official. No more us, no more maybe. Just together. My heart skipped and I smiled because I already knew. I couldn't agree more. It wasn't about grand gestures or declarations. It was about the life we'd built, the trust and love that had grown from something unexpected. Holding his hand, I felt the weight of all the moments that brought us here. The awkward introductions, the nervous confessions, the quiet evenings, and the laughter. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light over the pool, I realized the truth. Love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing someone over and over, even when it's messy or scary. And with Ethan, I was ready to choose that every day. We stood up, stepping out of the water and into whatever came next, together. The lifeguard who asked if I needed mouth-to-mouth had saved more than just my breath that day. He'd saved my heart, and that's the kind of rescue worth holding on to.